Today is a lovely Monday. I hope we all had a lovely weekend. I did. We had lots of fun, weddings, bridal showers, kitchen kitchen parties and church conference. So much that was going on. And this was one of the reasons why I decided to switch topics and bring in black tax topic before we tackle the topic on investments. So this session fits in as well as we reflect on the 100 days of national productivity and mindset change, a period that encourages individuals and institutions to examine how we think, how we work, and how we manage our resources in ways that contribute towards both national development and personal development. Believe it or not, today is the 61st day of national productivity. Well done, team. We've moved on 61. We've crossed the 50% line, and now we are heading towards the end of the line. And so before we get there, I thought we should look at topics of relevance to our society and our setting of today. Let me start first by defining what black tax is, in case there are some of us here who may not be conversant with the definition black tax, but I know you know what it is, except you may not know the terminology black tax. Well, black tax is the unwritten and often mandatory financial support that we working class Black professionals and first generation earners provide support to their extended families, and it is often out of obligation. This is rooted in cultural values of community and historical economic disadvantage. It can actually hinder personal wealth creation when it becomes a financial burden and when it is not managed properly. It stems from a high expectation, particularly when you have family members that people seemingly think have made it in life. They become the ones that get overstretched. However, even those that may not be are now overstretched because of this issue of everybody ought to contribute towards a certain family need. Whether you have money or not, you're expected to appear on the list. So black tax has become a reality that many individuals have to navigate, especially so these days with so many branches of family. When you get older, you realize that your extended family extends beyond what you can actually even cope with. You have 5 children, and then they're all married, and all their spouses, their parents-in-law become part of your family, which is a good thing. I'm not complaining. I'm just giving the reality of what it is. And then you have all the extended in-laws. So suddenly you find yourself within a year, if your children get married every year, 5 years, your family will have grown by 10 other families. And so this black tax becomes a reality that many of us have to deal with. We tend to notice this, like I said, as you get older, because you are involved, you are called upon to be there for family. And you find yourself involved in one or the other of these demands pretty much on a regular or monthly basis. So as we look at matters of personal financial management for national productivity, I felt this would be a good time to look at black tax matters, as they tend to have a bearing on our efforts to build our own financial stability for national development. Hence my taking this topic before we look at the topic of investment, like I had promised you. We are still going to tackle investments, God willing, next week. So let's first look at the black tax, and then we'll move on to investment next week. So today, as we look at black tax, I will look at 3 aspects. One, the biblical affirmation of it, and then its pros and cons. So let's be mindful of how these can impact us in our financial management and how we can better manage these responsibilities while maintaining financial growth. So what are the biblical affirmations of black tax? Now, we are so privileged in Africa that most of our African values stem from the biblical perspective, whether we like it or not. There's a lot of correlation between our traditional values and also Christian values. So helping, like I said, this is the way of helping our extended family in various needs, which I'm going to talk about later on. But what are the biblical affirmations to this? One of them is that, as we read from James chapter 1, verse 27, true religion is caring for the vulnerable, the orphans, and the poor. So already we see that that is what religion is all about, caring for those that are vulnerable. And Deuteronomy 10:18 talks about defending the cause of the fatherless and the widows, and the love for foreigners residing among ourselves, giving them food and clothing. So it goes even beyond your own family to foreigners. That's a biblical injunction that we need to be caring for all these needy people. And then there's also a verse in Luke chapter 10, which talks about the Good Samaritan. This is somebody who just helped somebody they didn't even know. And that help was pretty much instant. So we get so moved. We don't bypass somebody that is in need. You get so moved as we grow in our African communities. And this is exactly what was happening in the biblical times if you look at what the Good Samaritan did. There's also the aspect in Corinthians of every person in the church belonging to a body of Christ. You are a part, and you're expected to function as a part of the body of Christ. And this is exactly what happens in our black tax or African social security system, where we find ourselves belonging. You become united with people, could be your relative, your neighbors, whatever it is. There's a sense of belonging, and each one of us is expected to play a role or the other. So what are the examples of this black tax? How do we apply this black tax in our settings? So one of them, you find monthly allowances where you are actually obligated to send a monthly allowance, be it to your parents or some vulnerable family member. As a matter of fact, we have such people in our family who, unfortunately, because of maybe ill health, are not able to fend for themselves. So the only way, and they can't even do any business because of their health challenges. So in order for them to survive, we just put them on a monthly allowance. And there's nothing wrong with that. So we just come up with a way that works. If you feel overburdened, team up with some other family members and see how you can help these family members. Some could be orphans who need educational support, paying school fees or university tuitions to them. It could be maybe your younger siblings or your grandchildren or cousins, or any family orphan that you know of within the family that you feel needs to get your support. It could also be medical expenses or funeral costs. Now, this is big in Zambia, funeral costs. We've had funerals after funerals, not only in our family, I've seen that with my friends everywhere. Every week you talk to somebody, I've been to this funeral, I've been to that funeral. It's like every week you hear somebody who's at the funeral. And these funerals call for costs, and this is how we do it. We all call upon each other, contribute towards these funeral expenses in order to bury somebody. And the unfortunate thing about them is they come unexpected because you didn't plan for a funeral. Suddenly it just comes, and you have to bury somebody within 4 days, maximum 5 days or so, or even a week sometimes if you have to wait for people abroad. Unlike our friends in Ghana, which I've come to learn, they take months. So maybe that also could give them time to prepare. Now, I'm not sure if in Zambia we are ready for this kind of a system because our mortuaries tend to be very, very packed. And so we may not be able to keep or hold bodies for as long as the Ghanaians do. I have a brother-in-law comes from Ghana. They had a funeral. And it took about 4 or 5 months before the burial took place. So I'm very confident with that. And then we come to weddings, the ceremony, exciting things. These are better off because we usually tend to plan for them. You get to know about them months before they happen. And with our weddings in Zambia, you know what that calls for. First, you start with the Nsalamo, Chisekela Nsalamo. And funny enough, we've all sort of adapted or picked other people's cultures and made them the Zambian culture. It's no longer the Bembas, the Namangas, whatever. It's now become like the Zambian culture. Although some tribes have insisted on what their cultural stands are, which I also respect. But I'm not criticizing any of those, but I'm simply stating what is happening. We find that when there's a marriage that comes in a family, you start with all these processes. The Nsalamo you take, then Salamo, you cook some dishes, which you take. Then you have Chilangamlilo, the young man is short and what kind of food he will be expecting his wife to cook. And then after Chilangamlilo, then comes the bridal shower for the young girl, where she's taught how to manage her house and her kitchen. Then after kitchen party or bridal shower, comes the wedding. After weddings, Kawaba Mashikulo. After Mashikulo, then after many years, we get now babies are born, or a few years. Then you go to celebrate the birth of a baby. Then after, you get Chilanga Mateveto if the young man proves to be worth what the family feel he is worth. And so you find one marriage has 7 ceremonies. Now, if you have 5 children, then you're multiplying that by 5, you have 35 ceremonies. If you have nieces and nephews, multiply by that. So I don't know, the list is endless. I'm just giving this to show the extent at which we can be overstretched in doing these things and supporting one another. But for those that are actually affected by, say, the funeral or the marriage, they get the relief because they get all this extended family support from every one of us coming around them. I've been a beneficiary of that myself, and I'm happy that I have a family that's very supportive, and I have supported other family members in similar situations as well. So then you have some who have housing support, where you find you have a member of the family who has no accommodation of their own and you need to pay rent for them. And there we are supporting one another in paying rentals for them. And then we have also the daily needs, covering unexpected daily needs of families. Suddenly get a call, somebody's in serious debt, they joined this village banking group, and now they cannot manage to pay their contribution. They are obligated to do so. They'll be taken to the police, and the list is endless. So you'll now jump in and start shuffling your finances in order to make support in all these areas. So this is what happens in our society. So how do we possibly manage all this? Now, this is why I'm saying it's a reality that we have to manage. Those of you who listened to my topic on budgeting for productivity, I talked about the must do's, the should do's, the could do's. And now I'm encouraging us to revisit our budgets and say, no, we have this reality with us. How do we manage? Let this not take us by surprise, as death normally takes us by surprise, where you don't know, especially death by accident. Maybe an illness, you can see somebody progressively getting sick. You start preparing yourself for any eventuality. But when it comes to accidents, these you don't know when they will happen, and suddenly you're faced with this death and you have to do it. So these black tax matters are that we should be surprised with. So within your budget, within your should do's, not the must do's, but should do's, because should do's are things that you have to incur on, but you can manage how you figure out how much to provide for that. A must is a fixed amount, like a rental amount, or a mortgage, or insurance for your car. These are predetermined amounts, and you cannot negotiate and say, I'll pay 50% rent this month. But for this one, you can actually say, I can save so much towards this and manage that within that. Do not always give excuses that you cannot support. Remember, one day you'll be the one needing this family support. And unfortunately, there's a tendency in families that people look and see who has contributed and how much they've contributed. And when your turn comes, and then you get hit by people not supporting you as much as you expect them to. So this black tax stems from our traditional African social security system. We have this African social security system, which we use to cover all these extended family needs. The traditional African social security system are largely defined by our communalism, our strong kinship ties, our extended family networks, and our respect for elders, emphasizing on collectiveness over individuality. So you are not an individual in an African society. You belong to a family. And that's where this Ubuntu comes in. I am because we are. The sense of belonging. You are not an island on your own. Even if you are born alone, you have family around you. So the kinship and family, which is the extent, this is, okay, let me just give a few key characteristics of an African social security system. One of them is kinship and family, where we look at the extended family to be very, very central with kinship, where it defines our social responsibility and also other issues pertaining to inheritance and stuff like that. And then marriage is often looked at as a union between two families rather than just two individuals. So you get married, know that you're not marrying into a family of one person. The moment you get married, you have acquired an entire family related to you. And anything about that family becomes your responsibility, or you are affected in one way or another. There's also the issue of communalism and Ubuntu. African society emphasizes collective living and social solidarity, often summarized by the philosophy of what I said, Ubuntu, which translates to I am because we are. Then we have the social hierarchy, the structure that is maintained through respect for all elders. Anybody older than you is your elder sister, elder brother. If they are your parents' age mates, then they are your mother, they are your father. There's this social hierarchy. You just look at somebody, you gauge yourself, do they look older or younger than me? And the way you relate with them immediately changes. Sometimes you could be mistaken because maybe they look younger than their age. And so they will correct you if they know you're younger and say, actually, Ndimukulu. And for the Bembas and generally Afro-Zambians, we go Vaso and so, if they're older than you. And then we have children, where a child belongs to a village rather than a single family. You find a child in the village, in the compound, misbehaving, it's your responsibility as an older person to correct that child. Whether they are yours or not, you have to correct them. Then we have social organization, traditional units, including clans, lineage, and kingdoms. And then we have the religious and cultural section, which is the religious is traditional spirituality, which often involves ancestral veneration and animism. But nowadays we have the growing influence of Christianity, and sadly, maybe I shouldn't say sadly, Christianity and other religions. I was saying sadly because Zambia is a Christian nation, but other religions have found their way into our country. So we have all these influences. And lastly, modernization and change. Contemporary African society blends traditional practices with Western influence. And this is growing bigger and bigger as we send our children abroad for studies. You find they are there longer than they've been in their teenagers in Zambia, and they're already influenced by the Western culture, with a significant change arising from also urbanization. When people move from the village into town, you see that all these changes start to come in. And so some of our children end up marrying into other countries, which is a good thing. But what that does is that our traditions and values get diluted or infused with others, and then they come up with their own family values. And so all these changes take place. So what are the advantages of this black tax or this African social security system? Well, there are a number of advantages. In fact, when I was looking at this, I found we had more advantages than disadvantages. But anyway, the advantages, the number one, it fosters unity and a strong sense of belonging. So you are never alone in our African setup. You're never alone. Even if you are the only child of a family and you lost both your parents, trust me, you still have family around you. Whatever comes out around about you, there will be family rallying behind you. And then we have issues of elevation for the vulnerable household. Those who are not able to fend for themselves have support from family members. And it also enhances social inclusion. You belong to a group. It provides essential income support for elderly and disabled or any vulnerable member. It encourages communities to work together to tackle issues of poverty, disease, funerals, and anything that can affect a community. And which can be done more effectively as a group than as an individual. And it promotes reconciliation and forgiveness. Because when you have these events coming around, you just find yourself, getting involved even with somebody that you had an issue with. And in so doing, that person will soften in their hearts and see how you've come around them, and you start now reconciling and forgive one another, and the relationship gets restored. It also fosters respect and dignity and encourages hospitality and generosity, which are all both biblical concepts, hospitality and generosity, and collectiveness as well. You become people that work together collectively. And when it comes to mobilization of funds for funerals and weddings and the like, it becomes like an easy access to money. It's very easily accessible. You don't have to go through bureaucratic efforts, go to the bank, the manager, this person, that person. Money just keeps flowing in as long as you've chosen a treasurer within the family, and there you get your support. There's forgiveness, flexibility and responsiveness. People respond so quickly to a need, especially when it's time sensitive, like a funeral. And the cultural embeddedness, we get together as a cultural people. Moral duty, we do all this out of a moral duty. And of course, it's not an expensive venture. And we also go beyond our family and start relating with strangers. There's a love for strangers. So even when you have a foreigner in your neighborhood, they will never feel alone because of our social security system that is so encompassing, and they become part of your community. The list is endless. I just wanted to pick up a few thoughts that I thought I could provoke your minds with. And now let's look at disadvantages. The disadvantages of this system of ours is that it meets the needs of the hour, just the need for now. It does not create jobs, and so it is not easily sustainable. It does not increase development of capital. We're talking about national productivity. It can actually be detrimental because some of it calls for not only your financial support, but your time as well. So we find ourselves taking a lot of time to attend to these issues. Now, this is where we ought to be. Why I'm bringing this topic up is not for us to say it's a bad thing, but to see how we can encourage one another to better manage these issues. Like if you have a funeral, don't just go. The funeral takes 4 days. You're not going to be there morning to evening all the 4 days. Then you'll be unproductive because you're depriving your employers or your business of your time that you could use to generate more money to be able to help the same system over and over again. So the best thing is to assess, where am I going to be most effective? I was really challenged by one of our pastors, is now late, Pastor Shimba. He actually did teach us or talk to us as women of the church to say, when you attend funerals and these other family gatherings, see whether you're relevant. Where are you going to be relevant? Don't just go to increase the numbers. Don't just go to have your name ticked in the register. Find out, what is it that I can do to make me relevant? Maybe the part that you can do only take like an hour. You go there, participate in that an hour, and go back and do your work and come back. Okay, burial is different. We're all there for the burial day. But for any other time, just see how relevant you can be. If you're going to be of encouragement to sing and pray with the family members, so be it. Go when the people are there and pray and sing with them. But if you're going to cook, go during the time that you need to cook, and then go and work. This idea of just idling at funerals should be discouraged. I think we become a burden sometimes over for the family that is hosting the funeral, because you are there for breakfast, lunch, and supper, and they have to also factor you in when you could have fed yourself from your home. So it can lead to bad stewardship as well. Bad stewardship meaning people now are so relaxed. They just think, now for people who come around me. You're not preparing now for your death, no insurance for your funeral. You're not leaving an inheritance for your children. So everybody is now relying on this system for their sustenance. And that's not right. And then we're feeding dependence rather than independence. People now become so dependent on the system that they don't even think of being independent on their own. And remember, I talked about financial freedom, financial security, financial independence. You end up not being financially independent because you're dependent so much on your system. And the Bible cautions us against laziness. So sometimes we end up being lazy. And Paul in the Bible says, if you don't work, you don't eat. So I think this should also be promoted within our societies. And it can cause disgruntlements, because some people may feel that family was supported more than I was supported. They are looking and keeping a stock of how much how much is raised for this funeral, for that wedding, and so on. And they start getting disgruntled. And this can cause discontentment and destroy family relationships. It can also be overburdening for those who are assumed to have more than others. So those who seemingly look like they've made it more than others in the family, more is expected of them. But they don't realize that they too may have other bigger needs because of the situation that they're in. They may have more bills to pay. Maybe they've sent their children abroad for school, and those fees are not cheap, especially if you have to remit money in dollars. So there's a tendency of overburdening those that seemingly have more. And there's also a tendency of others taking advantage of others, where people think this one has less and you think you have less than others, so you don't give, even when you're able to give more. But remember the story of the widow who gave the little sacrifice, and she was commended more by the Lord because she gave her everything. So it's not about how much you give, it's just the thought of giving. So the financial impact on our budgets can be really, really strenuous. It can strain personal finances, making it harder for individuals to build personal savings, like I've been teaching about savings, investments, and it also affects your ability to grow your finances or prepare for your retirement. And also emotional components. While it can be a source of pride and love, it frequently leads to stress, guilt, and feeling that one's success is being held back. So you can have this inner thing of complaining about what's going on. You find it, you're overstretched, you get stressed out, and sometimes you're guilty. You can't give when you don't have. And this guilty thing can carry on and make you really feel emotionally drained. So enforcement of social security system is forced to avoid revenge. Some people do it to avoid revenge. Hey, many people will revenge when I don't give, so I have to give. Others say bakandoa. Others will feel, there's a division in the family, and so on and so forth. So my last part is just to caution us that this high expectation from us as Africans or Zambians needs us to really, really, really manage our time and our resources. It calls for a balance of our time and resources. We talk about the wheel of life in the mindset change process. Now, this is where the wheel of life comes to play. You have to be intentional on how you balance your time without making any segment of your life suffer, because you need to manage all those, the financial, the social, your family, your medical, your health, all these areas of your life need to be managed. So if you follow this social security system, you find you're drained by one segment of your life. So let's work towards that. Look at the lady in Proverbs 31. She was a planner. She planned and knew what was key for her family. And she was praised by her husband, by her children. She built families. She supported her family. She prepared for their future. And so we need to also plan properly in order to manage these demands upon our lives, and budget for finances, a budget for your time, and things like that. So I hope these points that I've shared with you have sensitized you enough to know that we have this reality before us, and we have to plan and see how we can manage these things for the better of our lives, and personal development, and that of our nation. So let us question a lot of these things and see how we can better manage them. They are good, but they ought to be managed. They are good, but they have their own disadvantages that can drain us. And also you cannot ignore them, because that's how we've been brought up, and it has worked for us. It continues to work, but we just have to make it beneficial and have more advantages than disadvantages if we better manage it. I thank you all, and I hope you picked one or two things from this session. It's a big topic and very overwhelming, but I hope by the end of the day, you'll have added your own thoughts to it, and send your comments so we know what you're thinking in light of this black tax and our African social security system. Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. God bless you all, and shalom, shalom.